Alright, I gotta tell you something crazy that happened. I don't know what the fuck is going on anymore. It started small, you know? Like those little things you brush off thinking you're just tired or overthinking. But now, looking back, I should have noticed it sooner. So it all began when my wife, Claire, stopped talking to me. Yeah, you heard that right. One day she just shut down. Like I'd come home from work and she'd be there sitting on the couch staring at nothing. I'd ask her how her day was and she'd just blink at me like I was speaking another language. At first I thought, okay, maybe she's just having a bad day, but after a few days it started to feel way too weird. And I'm not just talking about being quiet, this was like, something was off, you know? I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could feel this weird tension building between us. It was like she was in the room, but not really there. I'm not the kind of guy to get paranoid, but this was different. We've been married for 5 years and she's never done this before. Not even close. So, I tried to keep things normal like I didn't notice anything, but it was getting harder. I'd ask her questions, and she'd just stare at me. No words, no response. Like, what the fuck? So, one night, I'm lying in bed, and I hear her talking. I'm like, finally, maybe she's gonna snap out of it. But when I listened more closely, I realized she wasn't talking to me. She was whispering, like she was having a conversation with someone. I'm thinking, who the hell is she talking to? It's pitch black in the room, and I'm just lying there trying to figure it out. I don't know if I should get up and check, or if I should just pretend I didn't hear anything. But the more I listened, the more it didn't sound like, well, it didn't sound like her. The voice was all wrong. The tone, the way she was speaking. It wasn't her. It was like she was, I don't know, talking to someone in a way she'd never spoken to me. She was laughing too, but it wasn't normal. It was kind of off. Holy crap, it freaked me out. I sat there, frozen, just listening to her murmur, to this voice in the dark. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, turned on the light, and looked at her. She didn't even look at me. She just kept talking like I wasn't there. That's when I knew something was really, really wrong. But I didn't know what the hell to do. I didn't want to make her mad or upset her, but at the same time, I couldn't just ignore it. The next few nights were the same. I'd go to bed and she'd start whispering to this thing. And I started to wonder if I was going crazy. I'd ask her, "Who are you talking to, Claire?" And she'd just stare at me like she had no idea what I was talking about. "What the hell are you talking about, babe?" she'd say, like I was the crazy one. At first, I thought maybe she was sleep talking or something, but this was way too real. The way she laughed, the way she talked, there was no way this was just some weird sleep thing. No, this was something else. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. So, one night, I decided to put a hidden camera in the room. I'm not proud of it, but I was desperate to know what the hell was happening. There's only so much of your wife talking to someone who isn't there before you lose your mind, right? The next day, I checked the footage. I was expecting maybe a little sleep talking or something, but what I saw, oh my God, I swear. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. Claire wasn't just talking. She was moving around in bed like she was interacting with something or someone that wasn't there. Her hands were reaching out, grabbing at the air like she was holding on to something. And when she spoke, it wasn't her voice. It was deeper. More like a whisper, but not like any whisper I've ever heard. It was creepy as hell. Now, I'm really freaking out. I don't know if I should talk to her about it or just leave the house, or I don't know what the hell to do. I've never felt so out of control in my life. And then, that night, things went to a whole new level. I heard the whispers again, but this time, something was different. It wasn't like the usual conversation. It was angrier, more intense. I got out of bed and peeked into the living room, and that's when I saw it. Claire was standing in the middle of the living room staring at the wall with this insane look on her face. Her eyes were wide open, but they didn't look like hers. They looked like someone else's. She was shaking, like she was having some kind of conversation with an invisible person, and the way she was moving. It wasn't like her. It was jerky, erratic. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what the hell was happening, but I had to get her out of there. I walked up to her, and the moment I touched her arm, she whipped around, her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I saw nothing but pure rage in them. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, but it wasn't Claire's voice. It was like something else speaking through her. "Claire?" I asked, stepping back. "What the hell is going on?" She just smiled. No, it wasn't a smile. It was a grin, like someone who was enjoying something dark and twisted. And then she said the last thing I ever expected to hear. "You shouldn't have seen it. Now you have to die." I felt this cold, gut-wrenching fear sweep over me. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew for sure my wife, Claire, wasn't the person I married anymore, and that was just the beginning. So there I was, standing in my own living room, freaking the hell out. My wife, Claire, well, whoever
she was staring at me like she was about to tear me apart. Her grin, that thing that didn't belong to her, stretched wider, and I swear, it felt like the air around me got 10 degrees colder. I took a step back, just
trying to process what was going on. This couldn't be happening, right? This kind of shit only happens in horror movies, not in real life. But there she was, standing in front of me, her body trembling like she was holding on to something, some invisible force I couldn't see. I didn't know whether to run or try and snap her out of it. You need to snap out of this, Claire," I said, my voice shaky but trying to sound confident. "This isn't you." But instead of any kind of recognition, she just tilted, her head slowly, like she was studying me. It was creepy as hell. I swear, I felt like a prey animal under her gaze. "You should have stayed away," she whispered. And it wasn't her voice anymore. It was something else. The whisper was low and gravelly, like there was something in her throat that shouldn't be there. "Now you're a part of this, and there's no going back." I froze. A part of what? "Claire, what the fuck is happening? To you?" Her lips twitched into that grin again, and my skin crawled. Then, without warning, she lunged at me. It was so fast I barely had time to react. Her fingers dug into my chest, and for a split second, it felt like she was stronger than I remembered. I pushed her back, but it wasn't just a push. It was like shoving against a brick wall. I don't know what was worse, the fact that she was trying to hurt me, or the complete absence of recognition in her eyes. She wasn't my wife anymore. It was like she was a completely different person, a fucking monster. "Get the hell away from me," I shouted, shoving her harder this time. I was panicking now, my heart pounding so loud in my ears I thought I might pass out. But she didn't back off. Instead, she just laughed. That laugh. It wasn't her laugh. It was dark, twisted. It was like she was mocking me. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice still that same eerie, unnatural tone. "You should have stayed asleep, kept ignoring what was happening. Now you can't escape." My mind was racing. What the hell was happening? I couldn't think straight. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and I tried to call someone. Anyone. But the moment I touched the screen, Claire grabbed my wrist and squeezed so hard it felt like she was crushing my bones. I stumbled back, pulling my hand away, and that's when I heard it, the whisper again. Not just her voice, but something else behind it. A low, deep growl, like it was coming from inside her, but also from somewhere far away. It was like something else had control of her, something dark, something I couldn't even begin to understand. "Please," I said, my voice desperate now. "Claire, if you're in there, please just let go. I can help you." She didn't answer. Instead, she just reached for the drawer where we kept the kitchen knives. I was frozen, for a second, just staring at her, unable to comprehend what was happening. She pulled out a knife, and that's when I felt the real terror sink into my bones. "Claire, no!" I shouted, my breath hitching in my throat. "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't even look at me. She was just staring at the knife like she was fascinated by it. The way her hand held the blade so calmly. It was like she wasn't even the same person. I couldn't even recognize her anymore. "Come on, Claire, drop the knife," I begged, my voice cracking. "This isn't you, please." But she turned her head slowly, locking eyes with me. That grin was still there, stretching wider until it was almost impossible to see her face beneath it. "I'm not Claire anymore," she said, her voice so cold, it felt like the air around me dropped several degrees. "I am what I need to be." I backed up, my pulse racing, my heart pounding in my chest like it was going to explode. I thought I was going to pass out from the fear, but I had to stay awake. I had to keep my wits. I didn't know if I could reason with her anymore. This wasn't just a woman I loved. This was something else, something worse. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice desperate. "Please, I need to know why." She stared at me, and for a moment I thought she might answer, but then her hand tightened around the knife, and with a sudden jerking movement, she lunged at me again. I barely had time to dodge. The blade missed me by inches, and I stumbled backward, my legs giving out under me. I hit the floor hard, my head spinning, and when I looked up, Claire was standing over me. "I warned you," she whispered. My chest was tight with fear, but I knew I had to get away. I had to survive. But in that moment, the only thing I could do was roll to the side and get out of her reach. "Please!" I shouted, trying to make myself sound calm, but the words came out shaky, panicked. "I don't know what's going on, but this isn't you. Please, Claire, come back." But she didn't stop. She was moving closer now, and I could see the crazed look in her eyes. The way she was holding that knife with such cold determination, like she wasn't just going to hurt me, but she was going to end me. "I don't know what the hell is going on with you," I said, my voice trembling, "but I'm not going down without a fight." And that's when I realized I was dealing with something much worse than I ever thought, and it was only just beginning. I don't know how, but somehow I managed to get away from her. I don't know if it was luck or if my instincts just kicked in, but I somehow scrambled out of the living room and bolted for the front door. My hands were shaking so much I could barely grip the handle, but I forced the door open and ran out into the night, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I don't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get as far away from that house as possible. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but I didn't care. I didn't care about anything except getting the hell out of there. I ran down the street, not even looking back. My mind was racing, but it couldn't keep up with the panic that was flooding my body. I kept thinking, what the fuck just happened? What the hell was that? But I didn't have time to think about it, because all I could hear was the pounding of my own feet on the pavement and the sound of my heart beating in my chest like a war drum. I don't know how long I ran. I don't know how far I went. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. Not yet. I had to figure this shit out, but I couldn't do it with her, whatever she was now, coming after me. I ended up at a diner a few blocks down from my house. It was one of those places that never really closes, the kind of place where people sit for hours, drinking coffee and watching the world go by. I just needed a moment to breathe, to pull myself together. I sat at the counter, my hands still shaking, my breath coming in uneven gasps. I ordered some coffee, but I don't think I even took a sip. I was just staring at the cup, trying to get my brain to work again. But even there, in the quiet of that diner, I couldn't escape it. I kept seeing Claire in my mind, the way her eyes had looked, the way she moved, the way she wasn't her anymore. I kept hearing that twisted, unnatural voice of hers. It was like it was imprinted in my head, and I couldn't get it out. I needed to know what was happening. I needed to understand. But how? How the hell do you understand something like this? I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a moment, almost as if I was waiting for someone to tell me what to do. I scrolled through my contacts, but there was no one I could call. I couldn't tell anyone about this. How could I? How could I explain what happened? That my wife, had turned into something else, something dangerous. I had to go back, didn't I? I had to figure this out, but I couldn't do it alone. I needed help, but who the hell could help with something like this? I had no answers, just more questions, and the one thing I was certain of was that if I didn't get answers soon, I wasn't going to survive this. So, against everything in my gut, I decided to go back to the house. I waited until I was sure the diner was quiet enough and then slipped out. My heart was pounding like I was gearing up for a fight. Maybe I was. I didn't know what to expect. But I sure as hell wasn't going back without a plan. When I got to the house, everything was still. Too still. The lights were off, and there was no movement inside. For a split second, I thought about just leaving, about cutting my losses and getting the hell out of town. But that wouldn't do me any good. I needed to know what was going on. I needed to see for myself what Claire was doing. I didn't want to walk in there. I didn't want to see her again. But I knew I had no choice. Walked in through the back door, which I knew would be unlocked, and crept through the dark house. The silence was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards felt like it was echoing through the entire house. My mind kept telling me to run, to just leave. But I had to see this through. I crept into the living room where I had last seen her, and that's when I heard it again. The whispering. I froze. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. I followed the sound as if some invisible force was guiding me. I turned the corner into the hallway and I saw her. She was standing there, in the middle of the hall, facing the wall again. Her head was tilted back, like she was looking at something I couldn't see. Her hands were moving in the air like she was holding something invisible, and she was whispering to it again. But this time, something was different. This time the air around her felt heavier, like there was a presence in the room. Something. Watching us. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. I had to know what she was talking to, so I stepped forward, silently, trying to get a better look, and then she turned. Slowly, too slowly, like she was turning toward me. And when our eyes met, oh fuck, her eyes weren't hers anymore. They were black, completely black, and I swear to God I could see something moving in them, like shadows shifting beneath the surface. "You came back," she said, but her voice wasn't hers. It was that same twisted whisper. "You shouldn't have." I froze in place. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was paralyzed with fear. I knew right then that this wasn't going to end well, and then she smiled. That sick grin. "Now you're mine." I didn't know what the hell she meant, but I knew that this was no longer about me helping her. No. this was about something much darker, much more dangerous than I could ever imagine, and I was already too far in to back out. I had to get her out of that house. I had to save her, or I'd be next. I had no idea what to do. Everything felt like it was closing in on me, like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare. Claire, whatever the hell she was now, was standing there, with those pitch black eyes and that twisted smile. And I couldn't move. My whole body was frozen, every nerve in me screaming to run, to escape, but my legs wouldn't listen. "You came back," she repeated, and I swear the room felt colder, like she was sucking all the warmth out of the air. "You shouldn't have. It's too late now." I just stood there, staring at her. My mind couldn't catch up with what was happening. I didn't know what to say or even what to think. How do you talk to someone when they're not really there anymore? When they're possessed by something else? I opened my mouth, but the words didn't come out. Nothing came out. I wanted to scream, to yell, to tell her to snap out of it, but I couldn't. She took a slow step toward me, like she was savoring my fear, and I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, heavy and suffocating. "I'm not Claire anymore," she whispered, the words like a cold breeze brushing against my skin. "I'm what's been waiting for so long, the one who's been feeding off of you." I blinked, trying to make sense of her words, but I was too terrified to process them. Feeding off me? What the hell did that mean? My mind raced, but all I could think of was how far gone she was. This wasn't just a bad mood. This wasn't some argument that could be fixed. She was something else now. "Please," I finally managed to say, my voice shaky. "Please, just come back to me." But she didn't even flinch. Her black eyes never left mine, and her smile only grew. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice growing more sinister. "You're already too far gone. You should have stayed away when you had the chance. Now I have you." And before I could process what was happening, she lunged at me. She wasn't moving like a person anymore. It was like she was flying, like the air around her was bending to her will. I barely had time to react as her hands wrapped around my throat, squeezing harder than I ever thought possible. I gasped, clawing at her hands, trying to pull them away, but it was like I wasn't even strong enough to fight back. I could barely breathe. Her grip was unyielding, her fingers digging into my flesh like they belonged there. My vision started to blur, and the world around me seemed to tilt, like I was sinking into some kind of black hole. It felt like I was fading out of existence, my consciousness slipping away. This is it. She's going to kill me. This is how I die. Just as I thought I was done for, I remembered something. Something that I couldn't let go of. Something I had to try or I wouldn't forgive myself. In a burst of desperation, I reached down and grabbed the lamp that was sitting on the table next to me. With every ounce of strength I had left, I swung it at her, hitting her in the side. She yelped, releasing her grip for just a moment, and that was enough. I shoved her away from me, gasping for air, my throat raw. I stumbled back, backing into the wall, trying to catch my breath. I don't know how, but I managed to get to my feet. I wasn't thinking anymore. My body was running on pure instinct now. Claire, whatever she was slowly getting up, her body jerking unnaturally as she rose. The smile was gone now, replaced with an expression that could only be described as pure, unfiltered rage. "You should have stayed down," she hissed. I didn't wait around to see what she'd do next. I turned and bolted for the door, my body moving without thought. My mind was too scrambled, too broken to focus on anything other than escaping. I didn't even check to see if she was following me. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything except getting out of that house and surviving. I sprinted through the house, not bothering to look back, and slammed the door open. The cold night air hit me again, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like I was being pushed into the darkness, like I wasn't in control anymore. I ran out of the house, but this time I didn't stop. I kept running. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where I would end up, but I couldn't go back there. Not to that house, not to her. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just knew I couldn't let her catch me. I couldn't let whatever she was now, whatever had her, win. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed on the side of the road, gasping for breath, my body exhausted, my mind broken. But I wasn't safe yet. I knew that. I could still feel it. The pull, the darkness following me, chasing me down. And then I heard it. That voice, that whisper. You can't escape me. It was Claire's voice, but it wasn't Claire. Not anymore. And I knew in that moment that this wasn't over. It wasn't even close to over. She would come for me, and I would never be free. Never.